The morning light filtered through the tall glass ceiling of Ridgemont Mall, casting long shadows across the empty food court. At this early hour, the only sounds were the gentle hum of air conditioning and the squeaky wheels of a cleaning cart in the distance. This was Tom's favorite time of day. Before the shoppers arrived, before the endless chatter and bustle of commerce began, these quiet moments belonged to him alone. Tom had been working security at Ridgemont for nearly 8 years now. At 45, his salt and pepper hair and the slight limp from an old construction injury gave him a distinctive appearance that regular mall visitors had come to recognize. The overnight shift had just ended and most of his coworkers had already clocked out, eager to get home to their beds. But Tom always took his time on Sunday morning, savoring the peaceful emptiness of the massive shopping center. Morning patrol complete. All clear in the West Wing. He spoke into his radio, his deep voice echoing slightly in the vacant corridor. The response came back crackling through the speaker, his supervisor acknowledging the update from the security office across the mall. Tom continued his path through the food court, keys jingling softly at his hip. He'd walked this route hundreds, maybe thousands of times, but today something caught his eye. Something that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. In the far corner of the food court, next to the shuttered Thai food stand, stood a piano. Not a grand piano, but a modest upright model with a dark wooden finish. It looked out of place among the plastic tables and chairs, like a dignified elderly gentleman who had wandered into a children's playground by mistake. Tom approached slowly, his security instincts kicking in. Unexpected objects in the mall could mean anything from forgotten property to something more concerning. As he got closer, he could see that the piano wasn't new. Its finish was dulled in places, and there were small scratches along the sides, showing years of use. A fine layer of dust covered the fallboard that protected the keys. "Hey, Rick," Tom said into his radio. "Did anyone authorize a piano in the food court?" After a pause, his supervisor's confused voice responded. "A what now?" "A piano. Upright model. About 5 feet tall. It's just sitting here by the Thai place." Another pause. "No, nothing on the schedule about that. Let me check the overnight reports." Tom circled the instrument looking for any sign of ownership. A name, a note, anything that might explain its presence. There was nothing. He carefully lifted the fallboard, revealing ivory-colored keys that had yellowed slightly with age. The piano appeared to be in working condition, though he couldn't tell if it was in tune. "Nothing in the reports." Rick's voice crackled through the radio. "Did someone seriously dump a piano in our food court overnight?" "Looks that way," Tom replied, running a hand along the smooth wooden top. "What do you want me to do with it?" "Take some pictures for the report. I'll call management when they get in. Probably have to get the maintenance guys to haul it out tomorrow." Tom acknowledged the instruction and pulled out his phone to take photos. As he framed the first shot, something tugged at his heart, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a very long time. The piano reminded him of one his grandmother had owned, the one he'd learned to play on as a young boy. Those memories were from another lifetime, it seemed. Before the bills piled up, before he'd had to drop out of music school to support his family, before music became something he only listened to on the drive to and from work. He found himself sitting on the bench before he'd even made a conscious decision to do so. The seat creaked slightly under his weight. Tom glanced around. The food court was still empty, the shops all closed, no early morning mall walkers in sight. It was just him and this mysterious piano. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. It had been years, more than a decade, since he'd last played. Would he even remember how? Tom pressed a single key, middle C. The note rang out clear and true, bouncing off the high ceiling and tiled floors. To his surprise, the piano was perfectly in tune. He quickly stood up, suddenly embarrassed even though no one was there to see. This wasn't his piano. He was on duty. He had reports to file. The maintenance team would haul it away tomorrow, and that would be that. Tom finished taking the required photos, made a note in his security log, and continued his rounds. But throughout the day, as the mall filled with Sunday shoppers, his mind kept returning to the abandoned piano. During his breaks, he found himself walking past the food court, glancing over to check if it was still there. Each time he saw people pointing at it, a few brave souls plinking random keys before continuing on their way, children being pulled away by hurried parents. "Any idea where it came from?" asked Darlene, one of the regular cashiers at the coffee kiosk. When Tom stopped for his afternoon coffee, Tom shook his head. Just appeared overnight. No note, no explanation. Seems like a waste, Darlene said, handing him his change. It's a nice piano. Somebody probably got a new one and didn't know what to do with the old one. Probably, Tom agreed, though he wondered who would go through the trouble of sneaking a full-sized piano into a shopping mall, rather than selling it or donating it properly. As his shift neared its end, Tom found himself making one final stop at the food court. The Sunday crowd had thinned considerably, with only a few teenagers lingering over soft pretzels and a couple of families finishing early dinners. The piano sat untouched in its corner. "We've got a removal crew coming first thing tomorrow," said Lisa, the mall manager, appearing beside him. She was a brisk, efficient woman in her 30s who rarely had time for small talk. Shame someone would just abandon an instrument like that. Tom nodded, keeping his thoughts to himself. "Unless," Lisa said, giving him a curious look, "you know someone who might want it?" "Save us the trouble of disposal." The question caught him off guard. Did he know anyone who might want a piano? He thought of his small apartment, barely big enough for his sofa and TV. He thought of his nephew who had shown some interest in music, but his sister's house was already crowded with 3 kids in a 2-bedroom home. "I'll ask around," he said finally, though he had no intention of doing so. Lisa shrugged and moved on to her next task, leaving Tom alone with the piano once more. The mall would be closing in an hour. Soon the last of the shoppers would leave, the stores would lock up, and another night shift would begin. On impulse, Tom sat down at the piano again. This time he placed both hands on the keys, muscle memory guiding his fingers into position for a C major scale. He pressed down gently, and the notes flowed one after another, a simple ascending pattern he had practiced thousands of times in his youth. The sound was so clear, so perfect, that it almost hurt to hear it. Tom closed his eyes and played the scale again, then a simple chord progression. Each note awakened something long dormant inside him, like spring rain falling on seeds that had waited patiently through a long winter. Before he knew it, his fingers were finding their way through the opening bars of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first piece he had ever mastered, the one his grandmother had loved to hear him play. The slow, haunting melody filled the food court, each note hanging in the air like a whispered secret. Tom lost track of time as he played, his fingers remembering what his conscious mind had forgotten. He wasn't aware of the few remaining shoppers turning to look, or of Lisa pausing in her rounds to listen. For those moments, there was only the music, the gentle rise and fall of the melody, the steady pulse of the left hand, the emotional journey of a piece written 2 centuries ago that still had the power to move the human heart. When he finally played the last note of the first movement, Tom became aware of a sound he hadn't expected: applause. Startled, he turned to find a small group of people standing behind him. Lisa, a couple of store clerks closing up for the night, and a family with 2 wide-eyed children. "That was beautiful," said the mother, genuine admiration in her voice. "Do you play here often?" Tom felt heat rise in his cheeks. "No, I'm actually security. Just checking out the piano before it gets removed." "You're getting rid of it?" asked one of the children, disappointment clear on his face. Before Tom could answer, Lisa stepped forward. "We haven't decided yet," she said, giving Tom a thoughtful look. "We might have just found a better use for it." As the small audience dispersed and Tom prepared to hand over to the night shift, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. The abandoned piano, mysteriously delivered in the night, had awakened a part of himself he thought was gone forever. What Tom didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. The piano and his unexpected performance would change not just his life, but the entire atmosphere of Ridgemont Mall in ways no one could have predicted. The next morning, Tom woke up earlier than usual. Sleep had been difficult, his mind replaying those moments at the piano over and over. His fingers had twitched against the bedsheets, unconsciously practicing chords he hadn't thought about in years. His small apartment felt different somehow, emptier, as if the brief reunion with music had highlighted everything that was missing in his life. He made coffee and stood by the window, watching the neighborhood come to life. The usual Monday morning rush of people heading to work, parents walking children to school, all moving with purpose. Tom took a slow sip from his mug, wondering if the piano was still sitting in the food court or if the removal crew had already taken it away. He wasn't scheduled to work until the afternoon shift, but something pulled him toward the mall. Before he quite realized what he was doing, Tom had showered, dressed, and was driving the familiar route to Ridgemont. "Bit early for you, isn't it?" asked Frank, the morning security guard, as Tom walked through the employee entrance. Frank was in his 20s working security to pay his way through college. "Just forgot something yesterday," Tom replied, trying to sound casual. "Thought I'd grab it before my shift." Frank nodded, already turning his attention back to the security monitors. Tom made his way through the service corridors and into the main part of the mall. A few early stores were already open, their lights bright against the subdued morning atmosphere. His steps quickened as he approached the food court, heart beating a little faster than normal. As he rounded the corner, Tom stopped. The piano was still there, bathed in the morning light streaming through the skylights. No removal crew in sight. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by confusion about why he cared so much. It wasn't his piano. It would be gone soon enough, yet he found himself walking toward it, drawn like a compass needle to north. "I see you're back," said a voice behind him. Tom turned to find Lisa, the mall manager, carrying a large coffee and a folder tucked under her arm. "I had a feeling you might show up." Tom felt his face grow warm. "Just checking if they'd picked it up yet." Lisa smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "I canceled the removal for now." She gestured toward the piano. "After what I heard yesterday, I made some calls. Turns out we've been looking for ways to make the mall more inviting. More of a community space. A piano might fit right in." "Oh," said Tom, not sure how to respond. "The thing is," Lisa continued, "a piano's not much use without someone to play it." She took a sip of her coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. "I didn't know we had a concert pianist working security. I used to play, a long time ago. I'm pretty rusty," Tom said, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Didn't sound rusty to me," Lisa replied. "Look, I have a proposal for you. How would you feel about playing occasionally? Nothing formal. Just during your breaks or before your shift if you want. We could see how shoppers respond." The offer caught Tom completely off guard. Play in public? For strangers? The very thought made his palms sweat. "I don't know." "Just think about it," Lisa said, already turning to leave. "No pressure. But that piano's not going anywhere for now, so feel free to use it whenever you like." After she left, Tom stood staring at the instrument, conflicting emotions swirling inside him. Part of him wanted to sit down right then and play until his fingers ached. Another part wanted to run in the opposite direction, back to the safe routine he'd built over the years. He reached out and touched the smooth wood, tracing a finger along the edge. The piano had a history. You could see it in the small nicks and scratches, feel it in the worn spots on the bench. Who had played it before? Why had they left it here of all places? "Are you the one who played yesterday?" asked a soft voice. Tom looked up to see an older woman in a mall walking outfit. Neat tracksuit, spotless white sneakers, a small fanny pack around her waist. She had the weathered face of someone who had lived a full life, lines etched deeply around kind eyes. "Yes, ma'am," Tom admitted, suddenly aware he wasn't in uniform. "I'm Grace," she said, extending a hand. "I walk here every morning before the crowds come. Been doing it for 7 years, since my husband passed. Yesterday was the first time I've heard live music in this place." Tom shook her hand. "Tom, I work security here." "Well, Tom the security guard, you play beautifully." She gestured to the piano. "Will you play something now?" Under normal circumstances, Tom would have politely declined and made his escape. But something in Grace's eyes, a genuine warmth, free from judgment, made him hesitate. "I haven't practiced in years," he said, but he found himself sitting on the bench anyway. "Music isn't about perfect practice," Grace said, standing beside the piano. "It's about feeling something and sharing it. At least that's what my husband always said. He played the clarinet in a jazz band for 40 years. Tom placed his hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. This time he chose a simpler piece, a folk melody his grandmother had taught him before he ever took formal lessons. The notes came easily, flowing from some deep well of memory. As he played, he became aware of Grace swaying gently to the music. A few early mall walkers paused their exercise to listen. A barista setting up at the coffee kiosk smiled in his direction. For those few minutes, the normally sterile food court was transformed into something warmer, more human. When he finished, Grace clapped softly. That was lovely. What was it called? The Water is Wide, Tom replied. It's an old folk song. My Henry would have enjoyed that, she said, a touch of sadness in her smile. Thank you. Will you be here tomorrow? The question hung in the air. Would he? Could he make himself vulnerable like this again? But looking at Grace's hopeful expression, Tom found himself nodding. I might be. Before my shift starts. Then I'll look forward to it, she said, giving his shoulder a gentle pat before continuing her mall walk. By the time Tom's official shift began that afternoon, word had somehow spread among the regular mall employees. The coffee kiosk girl gave him a thumbs up when he passed. One of the janitors hummed the folk song as they crossed paths. Even Frank from the morning shift mentioned hearing good things when they changed over. So have you decided? Lisa asked, catching him near the end of his shift. About the piano? Tom thought about Grace, about the way the music had felt flowing through him after so many years, about the small connections that had already formed from a single song. I'll try it, he said finally. Just casual playing, like you said. If people enjoy it, great. If not, he shrugged. Perfect, Lisa said, clearly pleased. Oh, and I had maintenance move it to a better spot, next to the central fountain. Better acoustics, they said, and I put up a small sign explaining it's available for anyone to play, but that there might be scheduled performances too. Scheduled performances? Tom raised an eyebrow. Just leaving our options open, Lisa replied with a smile that suggested she had bigger plans than she was letting on. That night, Tom went home and dug through his closet until he found an old cardboard box he hadn't opened in years. Inside were his music books, dusty and slightly yellowed but still readable. He sat on his sofa and flipped through them, memories flooding back with each page. The hours of practice, the recitals, the dreams he'd once had. He'd been good. Not a prodigy, but talented enough that his teachers had encouraged him to apply to music school. And for a while he'd thrived there, until his father's illness had forced him to drop out and find steady work. One temporary job had led to another, and eventually security had offered stability and benefits. Music had faded into the background, becoming something he sometimes listened to but never created. Now, sitting with these old books in his lap, Tom felt a spark rekindle. His life had taken an unexpected turn, but perhaps it wasn't too late to bring music back into it, even if just in this small way. He selected a few pieces he thought he could relearn quickly and set them aside. Then on impulse, he cleared a space on his kitchen table and placed his hands on the imaginary keyboard, moving his fingers through the motions of one of Bach's simpler preludes. It felt both strange and familiar, like returning to a hometown after many years away, the landscape recognizable but altered by time. His hands were stiffer now, his reflexes slower, but the pathways in his brain lit up with each silent note. Tomorrow he would play for real, not for a teacher or a grade, not for some grand ambition, but for Grace in her morning walk, for the baristas setting up their shops, for whoever might pause for a moment in their busy lives to listen. As he finally went to bed that night, Tom realized he was looking forward to the morning for the first time in years. The abandoned piano had awakened something in him that had been sleeping for far too long. Not just music, but purpose. A reason to share a piece of himself with others. What he didn't know yet was how many lives would be touched by this simple decision, or how the piano would become a thread connecting strangers in ways none of them could have imagined. True to his word, Tom arrived at the mall early the next morning. He carried a worn leather folder containing sheet music he'd practiced late into the night. His fingers were slightly sore, unused to the repetitive movements after so many years. But it was a good kind of pain, like muscles waking up after a long sleep. The mall was quiet at this hour, just a handful of employees preparing for the day, and the regular group of mall walkers making their rounds. Tom nodded to Frank as he passed the security office, trying to ignore the curious look on the younger man's face. As Lisa had promised, the piano had been moved next to the central fountain. It was a better spot, with natural light from the skylights and the gentle sound of water creating a peaceful backdrop. A small, tasteful sign had been placed nearby. Community piano. Please enjoy respectfully. Tom set his music folder on the piano and sat down, adjusting the bench height. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Even though there were only a few people in the mall, the idea of playing in public still made his heart race. He flexed his fingers and began with simple scales to warm up. "You came," said a familiar voice. Tom looked up to see Grace, dressed in another neat tracksuit, today's in a shade of light blue. She was smiling, clearly pleased he had kept his word. "I said I might," Tom replied with a small smile of his own. "What will you play for us today?" Grace asked, settling herself on a nearby bench. Two other mall walkers, a retired couple who introduced themselves as Bob and Diane, joined her, looking expectant. Tom hesitated. He'd planned to start with something simple, but seeing their hopeful faces, he made a different choice. He turned to a page in his folder and positioned his hands over the keys. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the space around the fountain. It was a challenging piece, one that Tom had once played for his final recital before music school. His fingers stumbled in a few places, and he had to slow down during the more complex passages, but the heart of the music remained. As he played, Tom closed his eyes, letting himself be carried by the familiar melody. The piece spoke of moonlight on water, of quiet beauty and reflection. It seemed fitting somehow with the fountain's gentle splashing beside him. When the final notes faded, Tom opened his eyes to find a small crowd had gathered. Besides Grace and the retired couple, there were several shop employees, a few early shoppers, and even a mother with two young children who had stopped to listen. "That was beautiful," said the mother, her eyes shining. "My grandmother used to play that piece." One of her children, a girl of about 7, approached the piano shyly. "Can I try?" she asked, looking up at Tom with wide eyes. Tom nodded and moved aside, letting the child sit on the bench. She pressed a few keys experimentally, delighted by the sounds they made. Her brother joined her, and soon they were making up a simple tune together, laughing when they hit discordant notes. "I'm sorry," their mother said, looking embarrassed. "They've never seen a real piano before, just the keyboard app on my phone." "No need to be sorry," Tom assured her. "That's what it's here for, everyone to enjoy." As the morning progressed, Tom played several more pieces, each drawing its own small audience that would gather, listen, and then continue with their day. Between his performances, others tried their hand at the piano, some with obvious training, others just curious to touch the keys. Grace stayed the longest, watching with clear enjoyment as different people interacted with the instrument. "You've started something special here," she told Tom as he prepared to leave for his apartment before his afternoon shift. "I haven't seen people connect like this in all my years of mall walking." Tom shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise but secretly pleased. "It's just a piano." "It's more than that," Grace insisted. "It's a reason to pause, to share a moment. That's rare these days." Over the next few weeks, Tom fell into a new routine. He would arrive at the mall 2 hours before his shift, set up his music and play for an hour or so. Then he would leave the piano open for others while he went home to change into his uniform. Some days he would return to find a high school student practicing for a recital. Other days an elderly man would be playing old jazz standards from memory, his gnarled fingers dancing across the keys with surprising agility. Word spread about the mall piano and the security guard who played beautiful classical music in the mornings. Local social media pages mentioned it. A few regular mall visitors began timing their shopping trips to coincide with Tom's unofficial performances. One morning, he arrived to find a small vase of fresh flowers placed on top of the piano, with a note that simply read, "Thank you for the music." The piano itself seemed to flourish in its new home. Someone, Tom never discovered who, had it professionally tuned. The mysterious instrument that had appeared without explanation was now becoming the heart of a growing community. "Management is very pleased," Lisa told him one afternoon as he started his security shift. "Foot traffic is up, especially in the mornings. People are spending more time in the mall, which means they're spending more money too. The coffee shop near the fountain says their business has increased by 15%. Tom nodded, surprised that his playing could have such concrete effects. He had been doing it for the joy of reconnecting with music, not to boost the mall's bottom line. Sensing his discomfort, Lisa added, "But that's not the main thing. There's a different feeling in the air now. Like people are remembering this is a public space, not just somewhere to buy stuff and leave." That different feeling became especially clear one Tuesday morning when Tom arrived to find a crowd already gathered around the piano. In the center was a young man in his 20s, playing with obvious professional skill. His fingers flew across the keys as he performed a jazzy improvisation that had the audience tapping their feet. When he finished to enthusiastic applause, Grace spotted Tom and waved him over. "Tom, come meet Anthony. He's studying piano at the conservatory downtown." The young man stood and extended his hand. "You must be the security guard everyone's talking about. Grace told me you're the one who started all this." Tom shook his hand, feeling oddly self-conscious. "I didn't start anything. The piano just showed up one day." "That's not what I heard," Anthony said with a grin. "Apparently you brought it back to life. I had to come see for myself." He gestured to the piano. "Would you play something?" Aware of all the eyes on him, including those of someone clearly more skilled than himself, Tom almost refused. But the expectant looks from Grace and the others who had become his regular listeners gave him courage. He sat down and began to play Bach's Prelude in C major, a piece he had practiced extensively over the past weeks. The notes flowed more easily now, his muscle memory returning with daily practice. When he finished, Anthony nodded appreciatively. "Nice touch," he said. "Clean phrasing. You've had formal training?" Tom nodded. "A lifetime ago. Never finished, though." "Well, it's never too late," Anthony replied. "Listen, I'm helping organize a community concert next month at the university. We're looking for people with different backgrounds and stories, not just music students. Would you be interested in performing?" The question caught Tom completely off guard. Perform at a real concert? In front of a formal audience? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. I don't think I'm at that level," he said hesitantly. "You don't have to decide right away," Anthony assured him. "Here's my card. Think about it." As the young pianist left, Grace squeezed Tom's arm. "You should do it," she said softly. "Your playing touches people. That's not something everyone can do." That evening, after his shift ended, Tom sat in his apartment staring at Anthony's card. The thought of performing on a real stage brought back memories of his last recital, before he'd had to leave music school. The nerves, the anticipation, the sense of accomplishment afterward. Could he do it again? Did he even want to? Playing casually at the mall was one thing, but a formal concert was something else entirely. He looked around his small living space, at the security uniform hanging on the door, ready for tomorrow's shift, at the music books now permanently stationed on his coffee table, at the card in his hand offering an unexpected bridge between his past dreams and present reality. The abandoned piano had already changed so much in his life. It had reconnected him with a part of himself he thought was lost, brought new friendships, created a community where there had just been strangers passing each other. Maybe it wasn't done with him yet. Maybe this mysterious instrument that had appeared out of nowhere still had more to reveal. About music, about connection, and about second chances that come when least expected. With a deep breath, Tom picked up his phone and began to dial Anthony's number. The weeks leading up to the community concert flew by in a blur of practice, work, and nerves. Tom had called Anthony that night and agreed to perform, but as the day approached, doubt crept in. He found himself practicing for hours, repeating difficult passages until his fingers ached, worrying over tempos and dynamics like he hadn't done since his conservatory days. "You're going to wear out those keys," Grace commented one morning at the mall. She had become a faithful supporter, always there for his morning sessions, offering encouragement and honest feedback. Tom paused, flexing his stiff fingers. "I'm just trying to get it right." "And what exactly is right?" Grace asked, settling beside him on the piano bench. Despite her age, there was a youthful sparkle in her eyes. "Perfect technique? No missed notes? Or is it something else?" Tom considered her question. "I guess I don't want to embarrass myself. These will be real musicians, trained performers." Grace shook her head. "You know my Henry. He played in that jazz band for 40 years. He always said the worst performances were the technically perfect ones where the player had no heart. The best ones had mistakes but made people feel something." "Did he get nervous before shows?" Tom asked. "Terrified," Grace chuckled. "Sick to his stomach every time. Said it was how he knew it mattered to him." She patted Tom's hand. "Now what are you playing for this concert?" Tom showed her the sheet music he'd selected, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a hauntingly beautiful piece that spoke of night and dreams. It's probably too ambitious, he admitted. Play it for me, Grace requested. Not as practice, but as if I'm your audience and this is your only chance to make me feel what this music means to you. Tom took a deep breath and began to play. This time he tried to set aside his worries about technique and focused instead on the emotion of the piece, its gentle melancholy, the way it swelled and receded like ocean waves. When he made a small mistake in the middle section, he didn't stop to correct it but moved forward, letting the music carry him. When the final notes faded, he looked up to find Grace wiping away a tear. That, she said firmly, is what you should play at the concert, just like that. The day of the performance arrived cool and bright. Tom had arranged to swap shifts with Frank so he could have the evening off, the first time he'd requested a schedule change in years. He spent the afternoon in his apartment, alternating between practicing one last time and pacing nervously. An hour before the concert, he carefully put on the suit he'd bought for the occasion. Nothing fancy, just a simple dark blue jacket and pants that he'd found on sale, but a far cry from his usual security uniform or casual clothes. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The university's recital hall was smaller than Tom had feared, an intimate space with about 100 seats, most already filled when he arrived. Anthony met him backstage reviewing the program. You'll be our second to last performer, Anthony explained. Just before our piano professor closes the show. No pressure, he added with a grin. Tom's mouth went dry. Right before a professional? Maybe I should go earlier in the program. Trust me, Anthony said. This is a compliment. Professor Chen specifically requested this order after I showed him the video. Video? What video? Anthony looked surprised. You didn't know? Someone posted a clip of you playing at the mall. It's got thousands of views online. That's how the professor heard about you. Before Tom could process this information, a young woman appeared to usher Anthony away for his opening remarks. Left alone, Tom peered through the curtains at the audience. His heart leapt when he spotted Grace in the third row, sitting beside Bob and Diane from the mall walking group. Several other familiar faces from the mall were scattered throughout the crowd, the coffee shop barista, a couple of store clerks, even Lisa from management. The lights dimmed, and the concert began. Tom listened backstage as a variety of performers took their turns, music students playing classical pieces, a local songwriter performing original compositions, an elderly man playing ragtime with infectious joy. Each act was met with warm applause. As Tom's turn approached, he felt his hands begin to tremble. He closed his eyes, remembering Grace's words about Henry's pre-show nerves. The fear meant it mattered. He held on to that thought as Anthony introduced him. Our next performer has an unusual story, Anthony was saying. A few months ago, an abandoned piano mysteriously appeared overnight in Ridgemont Mall, and a security guard who hadn't played in over a decade sat down and brought it back to life. Since then, he's created a community around music in the most unexpected place. Please welcome Tom Walker. The applause felt distant as if coming from underwater. Tom walked to the grand piano position center stage, the spotlights momentarily blinding him. He sat, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. For a terrifying moment, his mind went blank. Then he looked up and saw Grace nodding encouragingly. Next to her, he noticed something unexpected. A thin, elderly man he didn't recognize watching him with intense interest. Tom took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes of the Chopin Nocturne filled the hall, which had acoustics far superior to the mall food court. The sound enveloped him, richer and more resonant than he'd ever heard it. He closed his eyes and let himself sink into the music. Halfway through the piece, something shifted inside him. The nervousness faded, replaced by a sense of connection. To the composer who had written these notes centuries ago, to the audience listening in the darkness, to his younger self who had once dreamed of moments like this. His fingers moved with newfound confidence, bringing emotion to each phrase. When the final chord resolved and faded into silence, there was a moment of complete stillness. Then the audience erupted in applause. Tom stood somewhat dazed and bowed. As he looked up, he saw many in the audience on their feet, including Grace, who was beaming with pride. Backstage, Anthony clapped him on the shoulder. That was incredible. I knew you had it in you. The rest of the concert passed in a blur. After the final performer, Professor Chen, who played with breathtaking skill, There was a small reception in the lobby. Tom found himself surrounded by well-wishers, many from the mall community who had come to support him. "You've done us proud," Lisa said, surprising him with a quick hug. "I've never been so glad we canceled that removal crew." As the crowd thinned, Grace approached with the thin, elderly man Tom had noticed sitting beside her. "Tom, there's someone I'd like you to meet," she said, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "This is Dr. Harold Wilson. He taught piano at the conservatory for 40 years before retiring." The elderly man extended a hand. "Remarkable performance, young man, especially for someone who hasn't played seriously in years." "Thank you, sir," Tom replied, wondering why Grace seemed so excited about this introduction. Dr. Wilson studied him thoughtfully. "I understand you had some formal training?" 2 years at Miller Conservatory before I had to drop out," Tom explained. "Family issues, needed to work full-time." The professor nodded. "Life gets in the way sometimes. But music has a way of finding its way back." He glanced at Grace, who nodded encouragingly. "I still teach a few advanced students privately. Based on what I heard tonight, I believe you have potential worth developing. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you lessons." Tom stared at him in disbelief. "Lessons? But I work security. I'm not a student anymore." "Age is irrelevant to music," Dr. Wilson said firmly. "And based on that performance, you have a natural musicality that can't be taught. The technical skills can be refined with proper guidance." He handed Tom a business card. "Think about it. No rush." As the professor moved away to speak with other performers, Tom turned to Grace. "Did you arrange this?" She smiled innocently. "I might have mentioned you to an old friend who knows people in the music department. The rest was all you and your playing." Later that night, Tom sat at his kitchen table, still wearing his concert suit, surrounded by a small collection of items. The flowers someone had pressed into his hands after the performance, Dr. Wilson's business card, the program from the concert with his name printed among the performers. He thought about how much had changed in the months since he'd discovered the abandoned piano. New friendships, a renewed passion, possibilities he'd never imagined opening before him. There was still so much he didn't understand. Who had left that piano in the mall and why? Was it mere chance that had put it in his path, or something more? He might never know the answers to these questions, but perhaps the mystery wasn't what mattered. What mattered were the connections that had formed, the music that had been shared, the joy that had spread outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Tomorrow, he would return to his security job, continue his morning piano sessions, and call Dr. Wilson to accept his offer. But tonight he simply sat with the realization that sometimes the most unexpected turns in life's journey lead to exactly where we're meant to be. 1 year had passed since the abandoned piano appeared in Ridgemont Mall. Spring had returned, bringing with it warm sunshine that streamed through the skylights and made the fountain water sparkle like diamonds. Tom sat at the piano, his piano, as he'd come to think of it, playing a complex Bach fugue that would have been far beyond his abilities 12 months ago. His weekly lessons with Dr. Wilson had transformed his playing. The professor was demanding but kind, pushing Tom to reach beyond what he thought possible, while respecting the unique journey that had brought him back to music. Tom's fingers were stronger now, his technique sharper, his understanding of musical theory deeper than it had ever been during his conservatory days. "That's coming along nicely," said Grace, who still arrived every morning to listen to him play. At 82, she remained his most faithful supporter and honest critic. The counterpoint in the middle section is much clearer today. Tom smiled, still amazed that Grace had learned enough about music over the past year to offer such specific comments. She had started attending community music appreciation classes at the university, claiming that if she was going to be his #1 fan, she should know what she was talking about. The mall around them had changed too. What had begun as a single abandoned piano had blossomed into a full-fledged community art space. The area around the fountain now featured comfortable seating, a small bookshelf filled with donated music books, and a bulletin board covered with flyers for local concerts, music lessons, and community events. Twice a month, the mall hosted open piano evenings where anyone could sign up for a 15-minute slot to perform. The events drew surprising crowds. Shoppers would pause with their bags. Families would gather with young children. Teenagers would wander over from the food court, all to listen to their neighbors share music ranging from classical masterpieces to pop covers to original compositions. "Don't forget we have the meeting with the foundation people this afternoon," Grace reminded him as he closed his music book. "They're very interested in expanding the program to other malls," Tom nodded. The Ridgemont Community Arts Initiative had begun simply as a way to provide structure to the impromptu musical gatherings, but it had quickly grown into something much larger. Lisa had helped secure a small grant from the mall's parent company, and local businesses had contributed funding in exchange for sponsorship recognition. Now, a National Arts Foundation was considering it as a model for similar programs across the country. "Will you tell them the story again?" Grace asked. "About finding the piano?" "If they want to hear it," Tom replied. Though he'd told the tale so many times now, it felt like recounting a dream, something both deeply personal and strangely distant. He gathered his music and stood, glancing at his watch. Unlike a year ago, he was no longer in uniform. 6 months after the community concert, he had reduced his security hours to part-time to accommodate his growing musical commitments. 3 months after that, Lisa had offered him a new position, Community Arts Coordinator for Ridgemont Mall, with the flexibility to continue his piano studies and performances. "I'm heading to Dr. Wilson's now," he told Grace. "See you at the meeting at 3?" She nodded, settling onto a bench with a book from the community shelf. "I'll be here. Oh, before you go, have you decided what you'll play for the anniversary concert?" The anniversary concert. In just 2 weeks, they would celebrate 1 year since the piano's mysterious appearance with a special evening performance. Everyone who had been part of the piano's story would participate, from Anthony and his university friends to the local children who had started lessons after being inspired by the mall performances. "I'm still deciding," Tom admitted. It felt important to choose the perfect piece, something that would honor everything that had happened since that Sunday morning, when he'd found an abandoned piano in the food court. As Tom walked through the mall, several shoppers and employees greeted him by name. He was no longer just the security guard with a hidden talent. He was the heart of a community that had formed around shared music. Children pointed him out to their parents. "That's the piano man." Even the tough-looking teenagers who used to ignore him now nodded in recognition when he passed. At his car, Tom paused to check his phone and found a text message from Dr. Wilson. "Visitor at studio today. Come prepared to play Chopin." Curious but not alarmed, the professor often invited colleagues or other students to listen in on lessons. Tom drove to the small studio where they held their weekly sessions. The converted garage behind Dr. Wilson's home had been soundproofed and contained 2 grand pianos, allowing teacher and student to play together when necessary. When Tom arrived, Dr. Wilson was waiting outside, looking more formal than usual in a proper suit instead of his typical cardigan. "Right on time," the professor said, straightening his tie. "Before we go in, I should tell you that today's visitor is quite special. She's from the National Conservatory in the city, a former colleague who now heads their adult continuing education department." Tom felt a flutter of nerves. "Are you showing me off, Dr. Wilson?" The elderly professor smiled. "In a manner of speaking. She's interested in your story and your playing. Just do as you always do. Be honest in your music." Inside, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair stood examining the framed music manuscripts on the wall. She turned as they entered, offering her hand to Tom. "You must be Tom. I'm Dr. Chen. Howard has told me so much about you." The lesson proceeded almost normally, with Tom playing his prepared pieces while Dr. Wilson offered comments and suggestions. The only difference was Dr. Chen's thoughtful presence, her occasional nods, and the notes she sometimes jotted in a small notebook. Finally, Dr. Wilson asked Tom to play the Chopin Nocturne, the same piece he had performed at the community concert a year earlier. Tom complied, finding that the piece had evolved with his growing skill. Where once he had struggled with certain technical aspects, his fingers now moved with confidence, allowing him to focus entirely on the emotional content of the music. When he finished, both professors were silent for a moment. "You play with remarkable sensitivity," Dr. Chen said finally, "and your progress in just a year is impressive." She glanced at Dr. Wilson. "Would you mind if I spoke with Tom privately for a few minutes?" Dr. Wilson nodded and stepped outside, leaving Tom wondering what this was all about. Howard tells me you had to abandon your musical education for financial reasons, Dr. Chen began. That's unfortunately common. But what's uncommon is finding your way back with such dedication after so many years. She opened her notebook. I'm here to offer you a place in our adult performance program. It's designed for talented individuals who took non-traditional paths in music. The schedule is flexible to accommodate work commitments, and there's a full scholarship available. Tom stared at her in shock. The National Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. I don't know what to say. You don't have to decide immediately, Dr. Chen assured him. But I want you to consider it seriously. Talents like yours deserve development, regardless of when they're discovered or rediscovered. Later, at the meeting with the Arts Foundation representatives, Tom found it hard to focus. His mind kept returning to Dr. Chen's offer, an opportunity he never could have imagined a year ago. Would accepting mean leaving behind everything he had built at the mall, the community he had helped create? As the meeting wound down, one of the foundation directors asked the question Grace had predicted. Could you tell us how this all started? The original story of the abandoned piano? Tom began the familiar tale, describing his discovery, his hesitant first attempt at playing after so many years, and the unexpected connections that had formed around the mysterious instrument. As he spoke, he glanced around at the faces watching him. Grace, Lisa, Anthony, who had stopped by after his classes, and so many others who had become part of this unlikely community. The remarkable thing, he concluded, is that we still don't know where the piano came from or who left it there. It just appeared when it was needed, I guess. After the meeting, Tom remained in the community space, sitting alone at the piano as the mall prepared to close. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys that had changed the course of his life. Have you decided what to do? Grace asked, appearing beside him. Somehow she always seemed to know when he needed to talk. I don't know how to choose, Tom admitted. The conservatory opportunity is amazing, but what about everything we've built here? Grace sat beside him on the bench. When Henry died, I thought my life was over, she said quietly. Then I started mall walking just to get out of the house. I never expected to find a new purpose, new friendships. She gestured to the space around them. This will continue whether you're here full-time or not. That's what community means. It grows beyond any single person. Tom considered her words. Perhaps it wasn't about choosing one path over another, but finding a way to honor both, his rediscovered personal ambition and the community that had helped him reclaim it. As if reading his thoughts, Grace added, Besides, the conservatory isn't that far. You could still perform here on weekends? Tom smiled, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. I guess we're at another beginning, aren't we? Life is full of them if you're paying attention, Grace replied. Now, about that anniversary concert, I have a suggestion for what you should play. As they sat together discussing possibilities, a mall custodian passed by, nodding respectfully. Tom smiled in return, remembering how he used to be the one making late rounds, how he used to think his life had settled into its final pattern. He glanced at the piano, the abandoned instrument that had somehow found him when he most needed to be found. Whatever came next, the conservatory, the expanding community program, the continuing mystery of the piano's origins, one thing was certain. Music had returned to his life, and through him to countless others. Some might call it coincidence, others might call it fate. Tom preferred to think of it as a reminder that even the most ordinary day might contain an extraordinary beginning, if only we have the courage to sit down and play the first note.